It's underrated because besides simply reading these articles, looking at the calendar, it's been almost a year since I did my Spanish oral. So today I figured I would share my tips on how I prepared for my Spanish oral and eventually got a 7 on my IA. These tips can be applicable to other languages too, such as German, Italian, or even Chinese. Number 1. Script your responses to possible situations that could come out. So what you should do is think about how you would have to describe an object or a situation or a person during the first 5 minutes of an oral when you're asked to describe an image. First, you should start with describing the concrete ideas, or in other words, exactly what you see in the picture. Then you can move on to describe actions using verbs. Think about how you should structure the sentence, and this will give you a good framework on how you should script your responses. Moving beyond describing the concrete ideas, also think about the phrases you would have to use in order to show thought and personal opinions. For instance, you could say, an idea X is very important to Y because of Z. Other transitions should also be incorporated. So these are words that you should remember and memorize in order to prepare for your oral. Moreover, incorporate different tenses into your script framework. For instance, if you wanted to talk about an idea that's very important, you could implement the use of subjunctive tense, imperfect, or even conditional. Overall, do what works for you. If you have the time and you're willing to put in the extra work, memorize a script that you can trust and create, word for word. However, it still isn't guaranteed that the sentence can be used or the theme will come up. So I believe that the best thing to do is to actually memorize phrases. This way, it's more flexible to different situations. You have longer chunks of sentences that you can implement during your oral, but you also won't have the pressure of memorizing something word for word. Basically, I highly recommend that you create sentence templates that can be widely used for various situations so that you can use them even if you have different themes. Tip number 2 is to understand the different parts of your oral. Your oral is not simply just made up of words. One part should be the vocabulary. What I would recommend is that you make a list of words for each possible theme that will come up for various situations. For instance, I made a list of words relating to technology, a list of words relating to art, a list of words relating to migration, etc., etc. Another aspect of your oral should be transitions. You don't have to prep 10 or 15 transitions, but at least know a good number, I would say around 5 or 6 that you could use. For instance, know the corresponding word for instance, for example, in summary, in contrast, firstly, secondly, lastly. Words like these will help get you points when the grader is grading your oral with a rubric. Another aspect is idioms. Pick idioms that you can implement during your oral that are widely used. When I was preparing for my Spanish oral, our teacher actually gave us a huge list of idioms, and from that list, I picked out around 5 to 6 idioms that I knew I could apply to various situations. I chose the word that meant everyone in Spanish, it's todos el mundo, and I used this instead of memorizing an idiom such as tengo hambre, which means to feel hungry, because I figured that using the word everyone in the world instead of feeling hungry would be more common in my oral. Another part of your oral should be details. Instead of talking about broad general ideas, you should also mention details and understand how to describe certain things in order to show that you have a good vocabulary. The final essential aspect of orals are verb tenses. Use a variety of verb tenses beyond present. You need to have verb tenses like future tense, past tense, imperfect, conditional, subjunctive, etc. You can actually link verb tenses with idioms because some idioms naturally incorporate a verb tense that's not present. And by memorizing an idiom and using it in your oral, you're also getting different verb tenses in there. Overall, you don't need to know 200 different vocabulary words or a whole bunch of transitions and idioms. You just stick to a small variety that you feel comfortable using so you can switch between ideas easily. Tip number 3. Memorize facts from readings. I think one of the most common pieces of advice that students get when preparing for orals is to read more of the articles written in that language. It's underrated because besides simply reading these articles, also incorporate the facts that you learn into your oral. For instance, if I'm talking about migration and I read an article about the number of migrants each year that move from Mexico to the US, then I can use this statistic during my oral to sound really smart. My Spanish teacher actually gave us articles she found from magazines and newspapers, and these articles were relevant to the themes that IB had outlined. The articles also had a wide variety of vocab and, more importantly, verb tenses, so I heavily borrowed sentence structures from these articles in order to help me prepare for my oral. If your teacher doesn't provide you with these articles, you can find articles in the relevant language online by yourself by looking up local magazines and newspapers for the country where the language is spoken. Tip number 5, make it easy for your grader. You want to make it easy for whoever's grading your oral to give you points. To do this, go over the rubric and look at what they will give you points for. And if you're feeling too lazy for this, I'll tell you this straight up. Have the elements that I mentioned previously, so have good vocab, have transitions, have idioms, have specific details, and have a wide variety of verb tenses, and I guarantee that you will do pretty good on your oral as long as you have good execution of these elements. What I did is I planned on getting all my idioms and verb tenses in the first couple of minutes of my oral when I was simply describing an image, because I had the most control over that. I didn't have any control over the second part of the oral where my teachers were asking me questions about different themes, but I could control what I was talking about when I was simply describing the image, because I would describe the image for around a minute and I still had excess time to talk more about the theme. So during that time, I would use different idioms, different verb tenses, and different transitions to get as many marks as I could on the rubric. Tip number 5, include personal ideas. I think one of the easiest things to incorporate is actually your personal opinion about a topic. And it's easiest if you predetermine what your opinion will be. What I mean by this is that you should script a sentence that says something along the lines of, I think that this theme is very important to this group of people because they should, etc. So here, you already incorporate multiple different verb tenses, so that already gets you marks. You're showing your own opinion, which shows that you're not a robot, you're actually an individual with thoughts. And you can also incorporate an idiom in here. For example, in Spanish, I'm pretty sure it is necessary that blank is considered an idiom, and having this gives you the personal aspect and gets you the idiom mark. And this will get you the idiom mark on the rubric. You don't have to actually think that it is important, but having a pre-decided script and stance eliminates the need to waste your brain power in making the decision about whether or not you agree during your oral. Tip number 6, practice effectively. So there's 2 parts of this. Number 1 is using sample pictures and trying to describe them. This will train you to find out what to talk about when you're looking at an image, and you will slowly develop a systematized way to describe it. For instance, you could describe it from top to bottom, go from details to big ideas and themes, and link it to a culture if possible. You don't have to spam practice with pictures, but doing this a few times will give you a good idea of how to describe a picture, because it may seem easy in English, but really isn't, because you're using a different language that you're most likely not fluent in during your oral. The second part of practicing effectively is actually just speaking aloud. This is unavoidable, and for the longest time, I actually kind of refused to do this until the very last few days. But speaking out loud gets easier on the second and third time. And to make it easier, just script your response and read that out loud to the wall or to a mirror. And you'll slowly get more comfortable with doing this, and this will help you a lot during your oral. Tip number 7, speak slowly and enunciate. You want to make sure that your grader can actually understand what you're saying, especially if you're worried about pronunciation. Speaking slowly will give you time to think on your feet too, and just pace yourself so that you don't run out of ideas. Practice beforehand with a timer so you know how fast time goes as you're speaking. Look at your picture carefully when you're doing it. Think about what you're going to say, and also just don't spend too much time talking about one thing. Instead, cover everything and use your time efficiently. If you can't think of a word or a phrase, take a few seconds and try to phrase it in another way in order to express your idea. I hope you found these tips helpful. Check out my video here about how I got 7s on my IAs, and this video has more general tips for overall writing IAs for different subjects. I'll also be making future videos about how I got 7s on my IAs or other subjects, so subscribe and stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.